She wasn't supposed to survive, but somehow, she did. What would you do if the person you trusted most was secretly watching you, studying you, choosing you for something you were never meant to escape? Because in this story, the real monster isn't hiding in the shadows. It's someone standing right beside her. And when the truth finally comes out, you won't believe who Dee really is. Welcome to Night Crime Stories Hub. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay tuned for daily true crime updates. Don't forget to subscribe. By the time the clock struck 11:47 p.m., the small town of Rosewood Falls had already folded into its nightly silence. Porch lights dimming, streets emptying, and the cold November wind dragging fallen leaves across the pavement. Inside Mel's diner, Emily Carter wiped down the counter for the last time that night, offering her manager a tired smile before slipping on her backpack and stepping outside into the chill she always dreaded. She usually called her mother for a ride, but tonight she didn't. Tonight, she walked. The CCTV camera on the corner of Pine and Alder captured her moving briskly down the sidewalk, her shoulders tense, her steps uneven, as though she kept thinking someone might call her name. She stayed on the main road at first, just as she always did, until, without warning, she veered sharply into a narrow side street completely off her usual route. No one could understand why. The footage showed no cars, no approaching strangers, no immediate threat. Just Emily walking as if pulled by something unseen. Narration later reveals why that detail mattered. Emily had spent her teenage years wrapped in emotional turbulence. Her father leaving without explanation, her brother disappearing soon after, and her relationship with her mother becoming a cycle of arguments, apologies, and more silence than love. For weeks, Emily had been withdrawing again, skipping meals, avoiding questions, offering empty reassurances that she was fine, but nothing in her past suggested she would willingly vanish. So when her phone was found early the next morning, shattered on the ground beside a decaying, abandoned house on Riverside Lane, the police were forced to reconsider their assumptions. It wasn't a runaway case. Something had happened in that stretch of darkness where CCTV couldn't reach. Something violent. Something planned. Hours later, as officers rewound the surveillance footage frame by frame, one detail made every person in the room go still. Just behind Emily, half-lit, barely visible, a tall, shadowy figure followed her at a distance. A face the Carter family insisted they had never seen before. The discovery of the shadowy figure trailing Emily sent a ripple of urgency through the investigation. Detectives immediately pulled every camera feed within a 2-mile radius, hoping the mysterious presence had slipped up somewhere else. What they found instead made the case even more unsettling. The same blurred silhouette, tall, narrow-shouldered, always half turned away, appeared in footage dating back nearly 3 weeks before Emily vanished. Sometimes he lingered near the bus stop. Sometimes he stood by the diner's parking lot. Other times, he hovered across from Emily's college, motionless, as if waiting for her to look his way. Yet not once did he approach anyone. Not once did he speak. He was a ghost living among them, and no one had noticed at all. When detectives questioned Lily Harper, Emily's closest friend, she broke down almost immediately. Through trembling hands, she admitted that Emily had confided something weeks earlier, something Lily hadn't taken seriously at the time. "There's this man," Emily had whispered one night. "He keeps showing up outside work. Same coat, same way of standing. He just stares at me, Lily, like he knows something." Lily had urged her to tell the police, but Emily refused, insisting she could handle it. But investigators soon realized handling it had been impossible. When they attempted to run facial recognition scans on the figure, the system came back blank. No criminal records, no missing person reports, no digital footprint. It was as if the man didn't exist beyond the frames of those surveillance cameras. Every lead collapsed into nothing. Every enhancement blurred his features instead of clarifying them. Then detectives accessed something that shifted the tone of the entire investigation. Emily's private digital diary, synced quietly to the cloud. The entries were short, fragmented, written during late hours when she was clearly afraid. One line appeared again and again, always typed in a shaky rhythm. "He knows my secret." What secret? And how could a stranger know it? Before detectives could begin unraveling the meaning behind Emily's words, a new clue arrived. One that would crack open an entirely different side of Emily's life and steer the investigation into far darker territory. It came from the last person Emily had contacted before she disappeared. The clue about Emily's last contact. A small, easily overlooked notification on her cloud backup shifted the investigation's momentum instantly. Detectives requested a full extraction of her digital data, hoping it would explain the chilling diary line that had haunted them since the night before. "He knows my secret." If Emily had been hiding something, her phone would be the first place it lived. Once the data loaded, investigators noticed a string of deleted messages to a contact saved under a single letter, D. The number wasn't registered to any carrier, and the texts Emily had tried to erase painted a far darker picture than anyone anticipated. The conversation snippets suggested desperation, fear, and bargaining. Emily repeatedly asked D to stop contacting her, promising she would send the rest, and begging them not to ruin her life. But the most disturbing messages were the ones sent by D. They included blurred thumbnails, intimate photos of Emily taken in moments she clearly never consented to be photographed. Some appeared to be inside her own bedroom. Others looked like they were taken through windows, captured from a distance. The captions were short, threatening, and methodical. "Pay what you owe, or everyone sees everything." When detectives confronted Lily with this discovery, she hesitated before revealing a truth she'd hoped would never surface. Months earlier, Emily had confided that she'd been involved in a secret relationship with an older man she'd met online. Emily ended it after realizing he was becoming manipulative, controlling, and increasingly obsessed. She never shared his name. She only referred to him as someone who didn't accept rejection well. Digging further, investigators examined Emily's bank activity and found something alarming. Just 4 hours before she vanished, she made a substantial transfer, nearly all the money she had, to an unverified account labeled in her private notes as D. It wasn't a typical bank deposit. It was routed through a shadowy payment service often used to hide digital trails. Detectives pushed for a trace. Took hours, but when the results finally arrived, the room went silent. The account didn't belong to any active user. It wasn't linked to Emily's former boyfriend. It wasn't linked to any living person at all. The bank records showed the account owner, a man named Daniel Crow, had been legally declared dead 3 years ago, and yet, someone was actively using his identity to blackmail Emily. The revelation about the bank account belonging to a dead man rattled the investigative team, but it also pushed them back toward the one physical clue they couldn't yet explain. Emily's shattered phone found near the old house on Riverside Lane, with the new understanding that someone had been stalking her for months. Someone organized, someone patient. The abandoned property suddenly felt less like a coincidence and more like a deliberate destination. Detectives returned at dawn, determined to search every inch. The house stood crooked and hollow against the gray sky, its windows boarded, its walls sagging from years of neglect. But the moment investigators stepped inside, it was clear someone had been there recently. Faint footprints in the dust, a freshly broken lock on an interior door, the smell of cheap cologne still lingering in the air. And deeper inside, behind a warped wooden panel, they found a hidden room. What lay inside stopped them cold. The space had been transformed into an unsettling shrine dedicated entirely to Emily. Photographs lined the walls. Emily at age 10 holding a science fair ribbon. Emily walking home from school. Emily at the diner just weeks ago. Some were zoomed in, grainy, clearly taken from a distance. Others were printed in multiple sizes, as though someone had studied each image obsessively. It wasn't just stalking. It was worship twisted into obsession. In the center of the room sat a thin mattress, stained and worn. Beside it lay ropes, duct tape, and a mounted camera connected to a small monitor that flickered with static. The wires ran into the wall, suggesting a more complex system hidden somewhere deeper in the house. On a small, uneven table, detectives found a journal. Its pages were filled with frantic handwriting. sometimes loopy, sometimes jagged, repeating variations of a single theme. Emily was chosen. She is my perfect creation. She belongs where I put her. The tone was possessive, delusional, and terrifyingly detailed. Forensic teams began dusting the shrine for prints, hoping for even the smallest lead. Minutes later, an officer rushed over, face pale, voice unsteady. A clear fingerprint had been found, pressed onto one of Emily's photos, and it belonged to someone painfully close to her. The moment the fingerprint analysis identified Mark Carter, the investigation took a violent turn. Emily's estranged older brother, gone for 5 years, barely mentioned by the family, was suddenly at the center of the most horrifying evidence yet. Detectives brought him in before sunrise, catching him off guard outside a rundown mechanic shop where he worked odd hours. The shock on Mark's face when he heard Emily's name didn't look rehearsed. It looked like disbelief carved straight into panic. Inside the interrogation room, Mark insisted he hadn't seen Emily since the night he left home. He claimed the fingerprint had to be planted, that he had nothing to do with any shrine or stalking. His hands shook as he spoke, but not from guilt, at least not the kind detectives expected. He admitted to struggling with severe anxiety and hallucinations years ago, the very issues that had driven him from the Carter household. "But I got help," he repeated. "I'm not that person anymore." Yet the evidence was impossible to ignore. His print on a photo inside the hidden room meant he'd been there, at least at some point. When pressed, Mark admitted he once broke into the abandoned house as a teenager, long before it decayed into its current state. He said he used the spot to hide from their father during violent outbursts, claiming the photo must have been planted or moved there by someone else. It wasn't airtight, but it wasn't impossible. Still, something didn't fit. The stalker caught on camera was shorter, leaner, and moved differently than Mark. Detectives reviewed additional surveillance footage pulled from nearby stores, hoping for clarity. One new clip stopped them cold. Emily wasn't alone the night she vanished. She was seen arguing with a figure significantly shorter than her brother, someone whose face remained frustratingly obscured by a hood. Before investigators could process the implications, a neighbor on Riverside Lane stepped forward with a chilling statement. She claimed she heard a muffled struggle near the abandoned house that night, and when she looked out her window, she saw a woman, thin, frantic, dragging Emily toward a waiting vehicle, a detail that reopened the entire investigation. The neighbor's statement about a woman dragging Emily toward a vehicle shattered the investigators' assumption that the stalker was male. Overnight, the focus of the case shifted dramatically. Detectives began canvassing the entire Riverside neighborhood again, this time asking specifically about a woman. It didn't take long for patterns to emerge. Several residents recalled seeing a thin, pale woman in a red coat wandering near the abandoned house in the weeks leading up to Emily's disappearance. She never spoke, never entered any nearby homes, but always seemed to be watching the street with an eerie stillness. One witness described her as a shadow wearing lipstick, another as someone who looked like she belonged to a different decade. No one knew her name, and no one had ever seen her before. This new information hit Lily especially hard. When detectives questioned her again, she hesitated before finally confessing something she had kept hidden out of fear of being blamed. A few weeks earlier, after Emily began acting distant and paranoid, Lily had quietly followed her after class. Emily walked fast, constantly checking behind her. Eventually, she turned into a quiet alley behind the Humanities building, and that's where Lily saw the woman in the red coat waiting for her. Emily didn't look afraid. She looked resigned. Lily had assumed it was some private matter and left before witnessing more. Now, she realized that moment might have been the first sign of Emily slipping into something far more dangerous than a breakup or family argument. Investigators cross-referenced every camera in the vicinity of Emily's bank withdrawal. Hours later, they uncovered new footage, grainy but definitive. As Emily stood at the ATM withdrawing the money she later sent to Dee, the same woman in the red coat stood directly behind her, head slightly bowed, her hands clasped behind her back. She didn't speak to Emily. She didn't touch her. She simply watched, as though making sure Emily followed instructions. The timestamp was only 3 hours before Emily vanished. Detectives now needed one crucial piece: a name. The break came when a local shop owner, after seeing the woman's image on a police sketch, identified her immediately. She wasn't a stranger at all. She worked at Emily's college. The moment the witness identified the woman in the red coat as someone from Emily's college, detectives moved quickly. Faculty records confirmed her name: Dr. Hannah Doyle, a psychology professor known for her sharp intellect, cryptic teaching style, and an unnerving calm that made even the brightest students uneasy. She taught abnormal psychology and trauma studies, subjects Emily had shown interest in before suddenly dropping the course mid-semester. When investigators dug deeper, they uncovered troubling patterns. Several former students described Hannah as intrusive, manipulative, and obsessed with students who had complex trauma. She offered private research sessions that sometimes went on for hours behind her locked office door. She was brilliant, published, and respected by the administration. But beneath the surface was an undercurrent of fear no one had dared articulate until now. Detectives obtained a warrant to search her apartment. The moment they stepped inside, they realized Hannah Doyle had crossed far beyond professional boundaries. Her home was disturbingly neat, too neat, like everything had been placed with clinical precision. File boxes lined her shelves, each labeled with cryptic initials. When investigators reached the C section, their stomachs sank. One of the folders read Carter, Emily. Inside were documents Hannah had no legal right to possess: Emily's therapy notes, confidential mental health evaluations, and personal history files. Each page was marked with Hannah's annotations: circles, arrows, questions, and phrases like patterns of attachment and ideal candidate. But the digital findings were even worse. On Hannah's encrypted drive, detectives unearthed hundreds of files sorted into meticulously organized directories. Some contained surveillance photos that matched the ones in the abandoned house. Others included audio recordings of Emily's conversations on campus, apparently captured without her knowledge. Then they found a directory labeled simply Project D. Detectives exchanged tense glances. The name echoed too closely with the mysterious contact saved in Emily's phone, D. With trembling anticipation, they opened the folder. At first, it looked like another collection of notes and videos until one file autoloaded on its own. A grainy live feed flickered onto the screen. The footage showed a dimly lit room, concrete walls, and a single chair bolted to the floor. In the center of the frame, barely conscious, shivering, and terrified, Emily Carter was alive. And somewhere off camera, a second shadow moved toward her. The moment investigators realized the live video feed was broadcasting in real time, urgency surged through the command room. Technicians traced the signal, isolating the source to the industrial outskirts of Rosewood Falls, an abandoned warehouse long condemned after a chemical spill. Beneath it, blueprints revealed a sublevel that had never been fully cataloged. That was all the police needed. Within minutes, a tactical team was en route, guided by the flickering feed of Emily's shaking body. As officers breached the warehouse, the smell of rust and chemical residue hit them instantly. The main floor was empty, but faint sounds echoed from below. A concealed door disguised behind metal shelving opened into a narrow stairwell descending into darkness. Every step tightened the dread in the room. When they reached the bottom, the scene matched the video almost exactly. A cold concrete chamber, a metal chair bolted to the floor, and Emily, pale, exhausted, but alive, struggling weakly against her restraints. Before officers could rush to her, a door at the far end slammed shut. Someone had been there seconds earlier. The sound of footsteps pounding through a tunnel confirmed it. A second kidnapper was escaping. But there was no time to pursue. Emily's whispering voice pulled them back. Hannah wasn't alone, she said, barely audible. She wasn't in charge. Medics worked quickly to stabilize her as officers searched the room. They found notebooks filled with diagrams, schedules, and chilling psychological charts mapping Emily's behavior over the past year. Hannah's handwriting was everywhere, but many pages were marked with notes in a different, unfamiliar style. Emily stared at those markings with terror. She called it an experiment, Emily whispered. Said I was chosen. Said I was part of something bigger. But she wasn't the mastermind. Her voice cracked as she revealed what she had learned in the days she'd been held captive. Hannah believed Emily possessed predictable emotional patterns, making her the ideal subject for long-term psychological manipulation. But the instructions Hannah followed, every plan, every tactic, came from someone else entirely. Someone Emily had trusted. Someone who had been close to her long before Hannah appeared. Detectives leaned in, hearts pounding, as Emily fought to speak. Tears streaked her dirt-covered cheeks. Her voice trembled, each word dragging out like a weight she could barely lift. She looked from one officer to another, as if fearful the name itself might summon him. Then, with a final, broken breath, she whispered the truth. The mastermind was someone none of them had ever suspected. If this case kept you captivated, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We upload new crime case videos daily. Until then, stay alert, stay aware.